Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, in this video, I'd like to offer an introduction to what, not only me, but what is called the mathematics of heaven. Let's begin here with a quote of the English visionary and great Platonic writer Thomas Browne. "All things began in order, so shall they end, and so shall they begin again, according to the ordainer of order and mystical mathematics of the city of heaven." So, what I seek here is to offer something of the vision, the ancient vision of mathematics, in light of what we conceive mathematics to be in the modern world, its place and its importance. But most importantly, according to the structure of philosophy which I have conceived in the books I have written, I seek to offer a reunion, a marriage, a repristination of this ancient conception of mathematics. A mathematics which, as I say here, is beholden unto meaning. Mathematics in the ancient time, that is, was not a description merely of structures. Mathematics was not concerned merely with shapes and forms and the outer surfaces of things, as we now deem it to be now. Mathematics is the study of quantitative things, of structures of things. But would mathematics have anything to say of beauty, of goodness, of truth, of the existential condition of the human being? Most people would argue not so. But that is not the ancient conception of mathematics. For in the very beginning, before we first and foremost distinguish letter and number, the first thing children learn is literacy and numeracy, the literate skills and sciences of letter, and the numerate sciences of number. But that very distinction did not so exist in the ancient mind. In fact, before we had the Arabic numeral system we use now, which is a fairly modern invention, all things considered, numbers were designated by letters. In fact, look over here at the number 1. The number 1 is yes, this is how the number 1 is written in the Arabic numeral script, but what is forgotten by most people is that this shape, literally how we write number 1 as a vertical line, is the letter, the first letter of the Arabic alphabet, alif, the A sound. A is the first letter of the alphabet, 1 is the first number. A equals 1. Before the advent of this numerical system, by which I mean a system of numbers distinguished a system of letters. Letters were numbers. Letters were numbers. Now, one could argue that was merely an inconvenience due to the absence of a distinguished numerical system. But rather I'd argue that as language corresponds to consciousness, as what you write and what you do is analogous in correspondence to what you think. This unity of letter and number was not an accident. And I can further justify this. It was the ancient worldview. For we all know Pythagoras as an ancient Greek mathematician, the author of the Pythagorean theorem. But Pythagoras was one of the greatest philosophers. More than that, he was something of a prophetic, mystical figure. Pythagoras, we are indebted to him for one of the most fundamental ideas which pertains to how we conceive mathematics now. The very idea that mathematics can be used to explain reality goes back to Pythagoras. It's a Pythagorean, the true Pythagorean theorem is that mathematics subtends reality. He said that because mathematics, these mystical numbers, are reality. And that's ancient mathematics. Number 1, the number 2 were not merely symbols to designate these abstract ideas. By abstract ideas, we now think of something disembodied, disengaged, not real, something which the human mind has abstracted out from this reality, a symbolic vault, a lattice work in the mind. But no, the numbers of Pythagoras were the divine principles which underlied reality, the mystical archetypes from which all things were begotten. Mathematics was the mind of God. Mathematics was divine. Mathematics was godly. It was God in that deep sense. Therefore, mathematics explains reality because reality is begotten by mathematics. Numbers subtend and generate reality. That was the Pythagorean vision. More than that, it was not merely the vision of Pythagoras, but it was the vision of all ancient prophets. And it is upon that basis that we now use mathematics, even if we have forgotten that basis and forgotten this theological and cosmological doctrine and vision. But the only reason our mathematics works, that we have this science of mathematics, is because there was, in the past at least, a philosophical vision which enabled that and upon which it is based. We now have the tools and we've forgotten the basis. It's like a tree, the roots of which have been shorn away from it. It will stand for some time, as it now stands, but inevitably it will fall, it will fail, it will tumble, and we see that now. We're in the process of that. But continuing, these were the numbers of Pythagoras, which were the ideas of Plato, and by that I mean what I said, that numbers are divine ideas and archetypes. Mathematics is the mind of God. That God is conceived, as is over here, as a divine geometer, divine artisan. Mathematics is the template and the foundation of the world. Whatever you see before you is ordered and structured because it is ordered upon an idea. That's why logic works. Logic works because we're not merely naming things, but we're tapping into the realities of things. That our mind is in synchronicity with reality. That's what this ancient vision of mathematics is. And it is unto this ancient vision that we are utterly indebted for modern science and modern technology. If it would not be without this vision. Yet if that was the vision of the ancients, the vision of the moderns is decidedly different. So there's what at least the philosopher Guénon calls the reign of quantity. If there was that ancient union of letter and number, modernity in a sense is defined and characterized by the splitting apart. Just as we split the atom, far before that we split something more fundamental. We split letter and number, quality and quantity. Descartes is considered the founder of modern philosophy. I think, therefore I am, as he said. In so doing, he separated, he sundered apart thinking and being. Being as it is, I am, and being as it is thought of, I think, were made two separate concepts. In the time following Descartes, we had the rise of materialism, which is now the default way we view reality, that what's real is matter. What's real are atoms. Atoms are real. Atoms are, or even below atoms, whatever there is. Quantum particles are the most real things. And they make things real, they weave together like Lego blocks and make up the reality we see. That materialism follows on from this separation of being and thinking, of consciousness and matter. Matter is now something dead and inert. And the next step of that is mechanism, the Newtonian worldview, where the universe is like a clockwork, it's like a structure, a machine. What is a structure of that machine? Mathematics. So you might think, is this not the vision of Pythagoras? But no, because the numbers of Pythagoras were qualities. One was a real, living, breathing principle. Two had a life, an emotion, a color, a quality. So did three, the four, the five. It was the monad, the dyad, the triad, the quadrad, the pentrad. They were archetypes, ideas, real, not mere structures, dead and inert, rid of life and consciousness. So no, it looks like this is a mathematical universe, but it's a mathematics, purely quantized. The mathematics, as I said, which deals with quantity. Ancient mathematics was not the science of quantity. Ancient mathematics, what you read of Euclid, what you read of ancient Greek thought, of ancient Indian numbers, it was not the science of quantity, not the science of matter, of physical stuff. We now think it is. We think numbers are used to measure things, measure length and distance and time intervals. But no, the number, if it measured the interval, as I said, it was because the number was before the interval. Yes, we can measure this interval for being some certain length because that number existed before the length came into being. So a body extends a certain distance, my hand extends a certain distance in this side, because before the hand came into flesh, there was its number, literally. The shape and form existed mathematically, and that mathematical idea became flesh. The word became flesh, as it was said. But now we've lost that idea, that number is the word. Now the number is merely, it is that flesh, is pure matter. This worldview of materialization, of mechanization, led unto the modern world. And I say all this firstly because it's important to know, but secondly, how does this all relate to mathematics? Well, I shall get to that right now. Well, in a sense, mathematics is the source of this. There was Descartes was a great mathematician. We think of a mathematics student might not even know that Descartes was a philosopher. A philosophy student might not know that Descartes was a mathematician. An ignoramus may not know either. But Descartes was equally the great mathematician as he was to a philosopher. The XY axis that we see, that we learnt in school, is called a Cartesian plane. Descartes did that. Because what was he doing is the quantization of space. The ancients didn't put numbers on space because space wasn't something to be measured. As I said, like the hand wasn't something to be measured, it wasn't a concrete thing. The way ancients saw things was as meanings, as ideas which were breathed into reality, to the extent that they barely saw the physical appearance. And so their mathematics were not concerned with physical appearances. They were not concerned with measuring space. They were concerned with intuiting the reality of space, because realities are not quantizations, measurements. Realities are the living, breathing parts of things, because being is thinking and matter is consciousness. But this mechanized worldview, this Cartesian conception of space, of mathematics as, like, so Descartes really began the process of seeing mathematics as a science of quantity. That allowed for the likes of Newton and Darwin to come up. Really what they were doing was applying Descartes' conception to new fields. Newton did it to physics, Darwin did it to biology. It was a quantization. That leads to the modern world, which is characterized by a continuous quantization, what we call bureaucratization, systematization, the increasing infrastructures which are above us and around us and surrounding us and lording over us. All of these things, the great structures, the monoliths, the technological institutions, they're raised up by this quantity. Look out of your window right now if you live in a city and you will see rows of houses, rows of buildings. What are they? They're homogeneous. They are each like unto the other. They are mechanical. They're in very block-like shapes. All of this is the sprouting out of this vision of quantity, industrialization, technology, science. All of this is born out of modern mathematics. Modern mathematics at the base and it's at the summit, because what do we learn? Right, education is the consummate institution of any society. If you have any society, what it needs to do, what any life needs to do to reproduce. How will a society reproduce itself? By replicating and instilling its ideals and virtues into its newborn people. Our education begins with this quantity. As I said, literacy and numeracy, letter and number, quality and quantity. Modern mathematics is symbolic. It's logical in a very specific way. Logical in the sense of being computational. It's rational in a very specific way of being a ratiocination rather than an intuitive intellection. And now, notice that I haven't taken a side for or against this. And you listening to this presentation may be in many minds. I imagine some of you may be students of mathematics in some capacity, mathematics, engineering, physics, something of that light, or have an interest in this. I imagine there are going to be some people who, on the other side, they're interested in qualities, they're interested in this ancient worldview for philosophical or spiritual reasons. I'm in the middle. I see both as necessary. I'm not against modern mathematics. I'm not against modern mathematics. Yes, all of this has occurred. I never said it's bad. And I think this is what separates me from perhaps more traditional outlooks, but really they see this page and this is bad. It's a degeneration. It's a corruption. This was good, this is bad. There is good and bad in both. Yes, we've moved into the reign of quantity and we've lost quality. But this is it. Modern mathematics does not need to be deracinated of quality, or deracinated of intuition. This worldview, the ancient worldview of the divine, the one principle standing over all things, the view of the mathematics of heaven, this does not need to be lost. And this is my vision. This is why I'm making this video. This is why I plan to teach this course. This is a marriage of these two things. Because you need both heaven and hell. There's no heaven without hell. There is no ancient without the modern, not truly. You need both of these things together. If the ancients had the conception of the qualitative, that's what they saw so profoundly. Because remember, if the moderns are blinded to souls, they're blinded to quality, we could argue to a great extent the ancients were blinded to matter, to quantity. The ancients weren't doing what we are doing now. They had not this technology, not this material progression and advancement. And this is it. I don't view them as necessarily contradictory and mutually exclusive. I see not why we cannot have both quality and quantity, letter and number, the spiritual and the material. So it's this union which here I propose, the union of the ancient and the modern, the qualitative and the quantitative, the spiritual and the material, the intuitive and the rational. It's this diagram, what I call the mindscape, which is the marriage of these two poles. This ontological logic which I have conceived in my philosophical work, as I've written in the trilogy of letters which I've published. But really that's besides the point. I'm not saying you need to read those letters. If you're interested in the theoretical foundations, go ahead and do so. But in essence, all I'm saying is that I have a vision of what I call the oneness of being, of the one principle. As I said here, the one principle, the divine archetype which stands over all things, that the one is before the many. But that is mathematics. That is mathematics. That was Plato's conception of mathematics and Descartes' conception. If we see here, I write letter and number. Well, let's take this. Language is letter. Yes, language is the effulgence and affirmation of letter into words and sentences. But how does the language take a letter and make it into sentences? Well, through grammar. It takes qualities and makes them quantities. It takes the word and makes it flesh. Because language is not just pure intuitive idea, it's communication. It's to take an idea which is formless and to give it form in speech and expression. It does that through grammar. You have formless quality, it becomes into e-formed quantity through the framework of grammar. Grammar is mathematics. Conversely, if mathematics, let's say it is the study of structure, of pure quantities. By mathematics, we mean to study the pure quantities of things. Yes, matter, atoms, measurements. And there's not going to be any equality there. This is essentially the modern conception of mathematics. It's purely axiomatic, purely logical. We have x plus x is equal to 2x. We will not say what x means. What does x mean? It's a symbol. It's a number. What does 1 mean? 1 is 1. It means nothing. It's just a structure. Yes, let us allow that to be the case, but I mean, just as you cannot have something purely formless, that what we think is purely formless, it accompanies form. You never really have an idea without the idea expressing itself in some way. There's always a language, there's always a grammar going on, whatever capacity, there's always a grammar. Similarly, you don't have meaningless symbols. They never exist. Because a symbol could not be without the meaning. The word was before flesh. So just as you have a grammar by which language works, language and mathematics are two poles. Language comes down into mathematics through grammar. Similarly, mathematics must ascend into language. Because everything has a meaning. You cannot look at anything and not have a meaning and interpretation. There is no x which is meaningless. A symbol will have a meaning. You interpret. So this passageway from number, from quantity to quality to meaning is through hermeneutics. So this is the mystical ladder, the ascension between heaven and hell and the marriage betwixt themselves. Grammar and hermeneutics. Mathematics is grammar. Mathematics, these numbers x and y, 1 and 2 and 3, in a very literal sense, is grammar. Now this is one side to division which we won't be studying here per se. That's more the topic of grammar, actually, if we study that. But here, what's to our concern is this, hermeneutics. That we take mathematics and conceive its meanings through a process of hermeneutics and interpretation, whereby we bring together mathematics and language. Now, how exactly does this work? Well, that is the vision of the oneness of being, which very simply is that in the beginning is the one. Right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Or very simply, كان الله ولم يكن شيء غيره. In the beginning was God, the one. Pure oneness, the oneness of being was in the beginning. Everything we now see before us, all these manifold structures and appearances and manifestations the many is become from that one. Now, just as I said, formless ideas become into e-formed structure, so the one is become into the many. How? Through the word, through the mathematics of heaven. That's what mathematics is, grammar, the grammar of the mind of God. That's why mathematics in this Pythagorean sense does underlie reality. That's why mathematics works, which, by the way, is one of the greatest philosophical problems facing modern science. Why does science work? Why is it mathematics, which fundamentally is something mental, something human? There's no mathematics over here. There's not a single abstract thing outside of the mind. There's no one or two. It's purely mental thing. We have mental conceptions of numbers. Now these things inside of here somehow correspond to the world outside so well, it's as if they really do master them, and it seems as if this mental mastery has manifested as a physical mastery by our modern technologies. But how? How? That's a huge philosophical problem. But if anything, it is an argument / perhaps proof of this Pythagorean conception. Or strike away Pythagoras, or rather sublate his name into the ancient conception, the word of all the prophets, that the one is before all things. Therefore the mind of God generates reality. That's the vision of mathematics here. And as I said, if you're interested further, you can read the trilogy of the 3 letters I've written to understand this philosophical system. But really, all I'll be assuming is this one mystical vision and apperception. That's my one axiom, that the one generates the many. Upon that, I seek to allow to unfold a study of mathematics. What will the study look like? Well, I mean, I myself studied mathematics for 4 years. That was my initial occupation and degree. We will begin with modern mathematics, because I do believe the moderns do it better than the ancients. Modern mathematics is something utterly sublime and masterful. It is a grammar of structure to a peculiarly effective degree. And this mathematics is right below physics, whatever you think of theoretical physics and the language of the universe, or below that, beneath that, really is mathematics. Really the language of the universe is mathematics. So, to those who might know a bit more, I mean, really, there's the foundation of all this, which is called the foundation of mathematics, is going to be our starting point. To begin with what's called set theory, which, in a sense, is purely philosophy, especially according to this mindscape that we have these numbers, these structures of sets. The hermeneutic of that, of set theory, is really Platonic philosophy, which is why, in a sense, one can call this course Platonic mathematics. It really is the vision of Plato. We have set theory. We'll explore such things as what is number, what is space, what is time. All these things are embedded together. What is logic, and the study of logic itself. The hermeneutics, I said, will lead us into ontology and metaphysics. We will study geometry, which leads us into cosmology, which are tied together. We will study algebra, which is particularly interesting to linguists, because algebra under this hermeneutic, and that's actually where we will come into this connection of grammar and language. Algebra is grammar. And you could say algebra is like grammar, but actually there's a particular facet. This is what I specialize in as a mathematician. Algebra is language from a very particular vantage point. And it's that vantage point I want to go into because it's important for people in a whole host of fields, for humanities students as well as science or mathematics students. For anyone who wants to learn language, this connection is of particular import. That's on the mathematical side, and as I said, while we're doing this, there will be a continuous hermeneutical process. Where will that hermeneutics take us to? Or what we might call mystical philosophy. Philosophy not merely in the sense of reading of Aristotle and the structures of logic, but by mystical philosophy I mean, in a sense, Platonic philosophy in the highest sense. A philosophy which merges into, philosophy in its original inchoative conception is a mythopoesy rather than the metaphysics. Mythopoesy is combined of two words, myth and poesy, to make in Greek. It's a myth-making craft. Plato's dialogues are myths, not logical textbooks. Aristotle wrote logical textbooks. By mystical philosophy, I mean these ancient symbols which convey the structure of reality at the deepest level. It takes us into numerology, by which I simply mean the science, the qualities of letter. Going back to, well, what does the number 1 mean? What does the number 2 mean? What is the quality which erupts onto the mind when we speak 4? When you are in a rectangular room or a octagonal room, whether you are in a quadrangle in the middle of a building, especially like in Oxbridge colleges, wherever you are, there's a meaning of feeling which is evoked, and this is the study of sacred geometry and architecture. What's the meaning of that? When a musical note is of a certain length, what's the meaning? Notes themselves are proportions and harmonies. Why does the C note evoke a certain feeling and the D note another, or the minor and the major chord certain qualities of experience? Why? All of this goes back to mathematics, and particularly in this hermeneutical light. As a short introduction to precisely how we might study this, well, in 5 minutes I can give one. The beginning of mathematics, if mathematics really does begin in number, is 0. The first number, in fact we might argue whether it is a number, which all the more confirms the fact that it's in the beginning, is 0, which is therefore the oneness of being, because 0 symbolizes the monad, the absolute. More than one has a termination. 1 is a thing, it's something there. 0, there's no thingness to it. It's pure existence, infinite being, absolute, non-delimited. That's what in theology we call the divine essence, the oneness of being. The one is the one, the God of Plato, as he termed it, in the Platonic tradition, that one principle which is in the beginning, which stands before all, from which all things are made, by which all things are created, or formed, effulged. Now this fundamental formula of mathematics, that 1 + 1 is equal to 2, so simple that we make a mockery of it, said that in Bertrand Russell's, what's it called, Principia Mathematica, I think. It took Russell and Whitehead, 500 pages to prove that 1 + 1 is equal to 2. I would take that a mockery, but no, it makes complete sense to me, because this formula is perhaps the most fundamental formula in all of existence. It's the greatest idea, the first proposition. The idea that the 1 creates the 2, which is precisely the vision of the oneness of being. That in the beginning is oneness, and oneness itself, without requiring anything else, just pure oneness, gives rise to 2-ness. And once you have 2, you have the all. Once you have a polarity, you have everything. The masculine and the feminine poles generate all of existence. That's an ancient conception found in all civilizations. Therefore, from God the world is begotten. And all of this in the language of set theory looks like this diagram on the right over here, where at the basis of that you have essentially the monad, you have the pure oneness of being 0. And you have this explosion, emanation, literally a V-shape coming out of that. more than a V-shape, it's exponential, it's bursting forth. Now what's very interesting is that in the biblical tradition there's an idea that the world is made and unmade by the blast of the trumpets. This word in Arabic is literally sword. The word sword doesn't just mean trumpet, but really it means anything V-shaped, a cone shape. That the world is made by the breath of God blasting in a cone shape. As I said, that's the first mystical vision of reality, which is this vision of 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. That is literally what set theory is teaching us. That the one gives rise to the many. This is modern mathematics. This is actually called the von Neumann hierarchy. To my knowledge, von Neumann was not a particularly spiritual person. Cantor's different. Cantor, the actual founder of set theory, is a pretty profound man. But regardless, this hierarchy is purely mathematics. Mathematics students will learn this in the third or fourth year. And really means nothing. They just learn it and they leave it. This connection is really never made, but it's there. It's right there before your own eyes. This is modern mathematics. It's not Plato's work, it's not Pythagoras' work, but they conceived it in their own times. But this is the first unity, the first nodal point, our starting point. That modern mathematics is still a divine science. I conjecture that, no, it's not lost of quality. Yes, if people have forgotten quality, that's different, they have. But you can never remove the spirit and soul of a thing. The spirit of mathematics still lives inside of mathematics. The mystical vision of the oneness of being is still the Pythagorean basis and origin of mathematics. It's this vision which I behold and which I seek to draw out from mathematics through its rigorous study starting from these first principles, and seeing where it takes us.